Simply Conscious presents Everyday Genius. Real life stories of everyday genius, unconventional wisdom, and inspiring transformations.
Hey, Daniel Wagner here, founder and co-founder of Simply Conscious. How does that work? I never know if I'm founder or co-founder. Anyway, I'm here with Pete Craig, who is also a founder and co-founder of Simply Conscious. And we're here to give you a bit of a lowdown on our latest podcast episode on the Everyday Genius podcast, where Pete and I extract deep wisdom and everyday genius from folks that we're inspired by. Pete, you've spoken to an amazing inspirational woman on a podcast. Tell us a bit more about it and what lit you up about that podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. So, yeah, I guess this one came as a result of the interview with Paolo Ben Salmi. So Paolo, if you've listened to that podcast, then you'll understand what was so amazing by that about him. Is an 11-year-old, but what kind of like really intrigued me was the fact that Paolo's one of 5 children who are all incredibly talented, who are all kind of publishers of their own books, influencers in their own right, have their own YouTube channels. And what I started to think about was, how is this possible? Who's behind this? And so Sabrina is actually the mother of these 5 kids. She was voted the second most influential black woman in the UK in 2019. And having met her and having had numerous conversations with her now, I understand why. And in this interview, we talked about how she's been able to do that. What's led her to create this space that's allowed all 5 of her children to develop in this way.
That was so beautiful, Pete. What led her to create the space that allowed the children to develop, right? That is, I think, one of the secrets, having spoken to her as well and knowing her for a few years, and more deeply now I understand what that means. What would you say was the standout nuggets of wisdom for you when you spoke to her? What lit you up? Were you like, I've got to remember this, I will share that? What would you say?
Yeah. I think that there were so many. I think the biggest thing was just this understanding that she has, that we aren't here to we don't know what our children are experiencing. So who are we to guide them? Who are we to block them? And she's created this space that allows these children just to be creative, just to live, to explore, to expand, and to develop their own genius. Much as she's created this container for them, and in a way she guides them. She doesn't control them. And they've all got their own unique characters that really stand out. And that's for me is what's so beautiful. She's allowed this space, and I know that's her mission, is to help families connect more and to allow that to develop, because it doesn't develop, because it gets kind of like not beaten out of us, but it gets kind of like ironed out of us gradually over time.
Yeah. Definitely true. I mean, there's so much to say for that if there is safety, that and there is space, people develop. And like so many of our podcast interviewees, she spoke about that it wasn't always that way. She's overcome massive challenges herself, been into all kinds of situations that you would say are the opposite of what she's living and experiencing now. And that's another really inspirational part about her, how she was able to take charge of her life, not from a level of control and have to, but from a surrender and being invited to life, which is what we are believing so strongly lights us up too. So I don't really know what else to say apart from, if you like that episode, if you get something out of this conversation with Sabrina, listen of course to her son, and I think there's another one lined up with another one of her sons, Troy. He's already reached out to me and you, Pete. And there's daughters to interview, so I think we're going to have the whole family on our podcast. So if you want to find out more about Everyday Genius podcast that Pete Craig and I are conducting, go to simplyconscious.com. On there, you can also choose other channels to connect with us. If it's Instagram or Facebook, join our group, whatever you feel called to do. I look so much forward to seeing you in one of our channels, events, and leave us feedback. So enjoy the podcast with Sabrina Salmi and let us know how it lands. What are you thinking about it?
Hello and welcome to this episode of Everyday Geniuses by Simply Conscious. I'm your host for today's show, Pete Craig, and today it's a pleasure to welcome someone who is really a bit of a superhero herself. She is the mother to 5 incredible and inspiring young thought leaders, but that's not all that she is. She's also an award-winning author, has authored 2 books, Lone Parenthood, You Are Enough, and Homeschooling. And much like her children, that's just one aspect of who she is. She's the founder of Dreaming Big Together, the publishing company. She's a co-founder of an outstanding rated Ofsted secondary school. And last year, 2019, she was voted the second most influential Black woman in the UK. So it's a real pleasure to welcome to today's show, Sabrina Ben Salmi. Hi, Sabrina.
Hi, Pete. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the humbling introduction.
The list of kind of things that you've achieved and that you've done, and that all of the family have achieved and done is just too long. We'd be here for the whole episode just talking about those things. So I tried to condense it to a few things that I felt were standouts. So forgive me if I've kind of missed anything out that was really, really important to you. But those were the main things. Before we kind of dive in, I just want to kind of give a little bit of context because I came into contact with your family through Paolo, who we've interviewed on one of the other episodes, and because of his age, I reached out and we had a conversation prior with you present because I felt that was important, and it was only really at that point, that I then realised that not only was Paolo such an amazing kid and has done so much, but you also had 4 other children, and to have created 4 kids that are so passionate and so driven and so independent, it must mean that there's someone special behind that as well. And then as I looked into what you've achieved, that again, it's in itself, it demonstrates an inner genius, an everyday genius that's there within you to have that ability to do that. So that's kind of like why I really wanted to bring you on as well, is just to really kind of like dive in a little bit to how that happened, and kind of how you've managed to inspire 5 children and given them that kind of freedom to grow. So why don't you call it, just before we go in, and I do this with everyone that comes onto the show, I ask like 3 questions, and these are questions that we ask ourselves each day and we share within a private group. And that is, what's alive in you right now?
Wow. What's alive in me right now? I like that question. Abundance. When I hear that what's alive inside of me right now, I have the logical answer, but the kind of one that's bubbling up and percolating right now is the energy that creates life, that creates worlds, that creates universe. Through us, everything is possible. And to answer the question of like the how, it was pretty much birthed through a desire of fear. And that's the long and short of it, the fear of, will they endure the pains that I endured? Will they grow up not knowing what I didn't know? It was just the fear of thinking there is no way on earth that I could possibly watch my children go through what I went through and be okay. It killed me. It just didn't make any sense. So it was a childhood birth as young as 7. I'm an only child. I had a tracheostomy, so I was bullied a lot in childhood. I was told I wasn't good enough. And when I became an adult, I felt that I don't want no one to pick my children. I want them to learn as young as possible that they get to pick themselves and they get to say yes or no, because I used to say yes to everything. And it didn't make sense. I never said no. I was scared to say no.
Oh. Cool. And I know there's a lot of things happening right now within your family unit. So if you take a moment just to reflect, what's the universe inviting you into at the moment?
Short answer, show up.
Yeah.
We had a conversation just before here, and it was a lovely sense of encouragement that this vision that I've had inside of me for so long is much bigger than me, and it's selfish of me to contain it. And I know that what we're bringing to the table will transform the lives of families for generations to come. And I mean in a monumental essence. I notice that we're often involved in making history over and over and over again. So why not do that for families? Why not awaken their genius? Why not inspire them to come together and work together to, in essence, create their own family empire dynamics?
Perfect. And finally, what are you grateful for right now?
Wow. Oh, I love these questions. Pete, I'm trying to contain myself more than anything. What am I grateful for? I'm grateful for not giving up on myself. I'm grateful for not listening to when I was told I wasn't good enough. I'm grateful for learning from the times which hurt me the most. And what I'm most grateful for in this present moment is being fully present in this level of interaction, and just thankful for all the internal systems that sustain me and all the external systems that do the same as well.
Beautiful. Okay, so tell us, share with everyone else, and we've talked about this a lot, but share with everyone else what your mission is. And I know there's a lot of kind of like component parts to this, but there's a lot that you want to like share, but if you could condense it into just what is if you had to put it into one line, what's your purpose? What's at the core of everything that you do?
You didn't tell me not to bring. I should have bought tissues today. I thought I was turned up for a podcast, and wow, you really pack it, and I thank you. To condense what I want to do is that I want no family to go to sleep in fear, and I don't want no woman to wake up in fear. And I feel that through the journey I've had with my family, I know exactly what needs to be implemented in order for that to take place. And it's time for me to show up.
Cool. Beautiful. And how often have you said that?
Just now.
Yeah. So when this recording is done, listen to it and write that down, take a note of that. And remind yourself of it every day.
Thank you.
Because that has more power than you imagine. Especially if it's only just come through you. That's dropped in because you're in a place of presence. So cool. So now you've shared that, what I'm interested in, what I'm always interested in, is the intent behind that. So where has that come from?
So when I was raised, my mother's Mary Paul and she's St. Lucian, and my father is Laken and he's Nigerian. And from the moment of my conception, I was told that I wasn't good enough to be on this planet because I was coming from two people that didn't culturally like each other. My parents were told they couldn't be together, and I was birthed into this rejection, hatred, and never feeling good enough from a very young age. So the birthing of that, when I was very young, I always knew that there was something else there that you couldn't see, but it sustained me, and I chose to believe that I was here for a purpose. I ended up dying 3 times. I had a tracheostomy emergency surgery. And again, there's all these stories of resentment and people not being there and pushing me around. And I said, it's okay. One of the things I want to teach people, Mummy, is how to forgive. And I believe that if we learn to heal ourselves, we'll be able to forgive again. So I had this picture going back to my childhood that I drew a bridge. So as a child, it seemed so simple, right? So I said I wanted to build a bridge so that the wealthy people and the poor people could meet in the middle and have conversations. So at that time, I dedicated myself to life as serving other people and being a conduit, being a bridge that helped people get from where they were to where they want to be. So I went through this cycle of helping people, supporting, but when you're young, it's learning. So I used to give a lot and never received. I felt embarrassed to receive. I didn't ask. I was just depleting. It's not until I got into my adulthood I started to learn the importance of looking at nature for balance.
Yeah. What age did you draw that picture?
I I always feel it was around 7, 9. Would have been older than 9, but yeah, that was this.
Do you still have it? Do you still have it?
No, I wish I did.
Yeah.
I wish I did, but I've got it in my head. I often talk about it, and it's a beautiful memory. So thank you for reminding me.
And so, and we haven't kind of like really talked about boundaries, but I get a sense that not much is off limits. But if you don't feel comfortable answering anything, then please just say, or don't talk, and I'll move on. But you talked about you were kind of like born into this, this environment where you felt that there was a lot of kind of like hate and a lot of negativity. I'm presuming not from your parents. This was from the families, from the wider family and from the wider community. Yeah.
So me and my mum had our turbulence, mothers and daughters and teenagers. We had that sort of normal, but no, the rejection wasn't from my mother. It was from the external family. She was actually told to give me up. I write about it in my book, actually, but she was 20 when she had me. And because I was so critically ill, they said, even if I do survive, I would have brain damage. So I had a serious speech impediment that I developed throughout childhood. And I had, my memory was really bad, affected, but she never put me up for adoption. That's what she was told to do. So she would literally have to pump me up, clean up my throat, and she fought for me. So definitely not from my mother, but it was definitely external. So I went through bullying throughout childhood, both in family, at schools, just everywhere I was put, really.
Yeah. And as a child, what coping mechanisms did you find or did you use to kind of like pull you through that? Because
I was a dream.
Sorry?
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because what you see a lot of times is what I think you just said. But I don't see that at all in your kids now. So I want to ask you, what was your coping mechanism, and when did you realize that was no longer serving you?
So my coping mechanism was choosing to just hold who I was, if that made sense. It was very much, I had a very strong awareness of love. I had a very strong awareness of connectivity. Where that came from, it didn't make sense as a child. It was just there. I would always have dreams. I would always have, it felt like instructions. And I didn't have an imaginary friend, because I started to speak to mum I never had an imaginary friend, but I used to play a lot with my toys, and I would talk like as if there was loads of us in the room. So I think what my coping mechanism was external expression. I've always been someone that expressed a lot, but then the environment somewhat said, don't talk too much, Sabrina, you're a dreamer. Like when I was at school with friends, and it was always like, don't talk. So it took me years upon years to actually get on the stage and start stepping into public speaking, because I had fear of judgment and just, well, no one's going to listen to you anyway, so why do it?
So how did that, and I'm guessing that, we see in families a lot, and we talked a little bit about this before, it's kind of like, how things just continue, and how these types of behaviours should by now be being filtered out. How did you stop that? Because it's very easy, for someone who's experienced that kind of trauma, as a child, then to just carry that on and expose your own children, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, to the same thing. How did you get over that?
It's a good question. I didn't for many years. Maybe just explain it a bit more. I was bullied a lot in my relationships. I was very easily to deal with being suppressed, to be bullied, put down, and you just get back up and you do it. So I allowed it to happen to me for many and many and many years, way too long. So I had to do a lot of forgiveness. Sometimes we talk about forgiveness. We say we forgive them, we forgive them. I had to learn to forgive myself, because I've let myself been used, abused, and disrespected in many ways than that should have happened. I wouldn't allow that to happen to anyone else, but I allowed it to happen to me. So a lot of the time I absorbed that essence, somewhat of put myself down as a sacrifice in order for my children to go forward. I stayed in relationships way too long. I stayed in toxic friendships way too long. So in all honesty, it didn't just cut off in childhood, it perpetuated. I started to go back to family members. Like as I started to be successful, find myself and I could help them, I'd run back and help them. And a lot of it came from love, but I think a lot of it also came from, am I valued now? Like I've done this now, I will help you now. Am I okay? So that was all happening in the subconscious. And it's only very recently, and if I be entirely honest with you, that I had a conversation with my dad and I said, I'm not doing it no more because I no longer need to impress you. I no longer need you to see that I'm good enough for me to know that I'm good enough. So it is a very stagnated journey and it's an ongoing process. It's about me checking in. I've had to put processes in place. I have to work on mantras and, just remind myself that I'm worthy of love. And it's an ongoing process. It really is.
Brilliant. From a, this is an interesting one, I guess, because each one of your children has followed, a very, very similar path. And how much of that was like, I don't want to use the word prescribed, but how much of that was consciously created, and how much of it has come just from the space that you gave them, and the example that you showed. Because this comes back to the intent question. Sorry, this comes back to the intent thing. There could be instances, and some people might think, that this has been done intentionally, and we see examples of it on TV and social media, where a child has a particular skill, and the parents can mold them and groom them, because ultimately, their success then means that they get paid, or they benefit. But then there's the other side of it, which is actually all that's happened is this space has been created that has allowed them to grow into and be whatever they are without being influenced by, TV, without being influenced by friends at school and all those types of things that condition us.
Beautiful. I love that question. I love that question so much, for the premise of what the picture it paints. Now, one of the things that kept me going back and forth is that I felt a deep sense of, what am I promoting parents to do? Because I have parents coming to me, oh my God, I want my kids to be on stage, I want them to write books. And I'm going, well, that's not it. Like, that was never why we did what we did. So our story was a lot darker. So I was going through domestic abuse, confidence. I mean, like, I was a dead woman walking. Anyone watching this, go onto Google, type in my name and just go as far back as 2011 and look at the videos. I basically entered the personal development world for one reason and one reason only. See, when I was young, I was raised by my mum, and my biggest fear as a child was that if my mum dies anytime between now and me turning 18, I'm going to be the only one at the funeral, and then I'm going to be taken into care. So that was the fear I grew up with. And when I started to get health issues, as you would, if you just keep outputting and nothing in and being taken advantage of, I started to have health issues. So I went to personal development, number one, to heal and learn, but the very premise, and a lot of people can vouch for this in the personal development world, I was going there to die. And my dying wish was that if I leave the planet today, if I didn't heal from quite serious health issues, if I leave the planet today, my one wish was that my children could go to anywhere on the planet and they would know someone that knew their mum that would look after them to some extent. That was the only reason I got. So all the essence of what you see here was an organics of a mother being desperate to preserve and throw her children as far as possible, just with the premise of, I'm going to pour into you every essence of what I know, what I create, what I believe to be true, all of my understandings, principles, integrity, respect. Like, I poured in because it felt like it was the last thing I could give them. I didn't have finances to give them. All I could give them was my knowledge and expertise and understanding. And I would ask friends, like, if you left the planet, what would you give your children? And they would say, like, I wouldn't give them money, I would give them books. I wouldn't give them everything. I would teach them how to fish. And I started thinking, how can I embody this into my child? Because I didn't know how long I had left. So I was going to these appointments and it was getting more and more dark. And my children did something that triggered what you see today, is that they started saying, oh my God, Mum, like these people who are old, my eldest daughter, she was saying, oh, they're old. Like, why am I here? It's really boring. I'll do it anyway. And I say, okay, as long as you could be quiet, Mummy will buy you a sweet or an ice cream, whatever it was, just to bribe her so I could learn. Well, that's what I thought. Now, at the time, I didn't know that there's such a thing as unconscious learning. I didn't realize there were 4 stages of learning. I didn't realize that between the ages of 0 and 7, if the child's in the room, they would just learn everything. So the wondrous thing that started to take over is that although they seem like they're doing the same thing, if you actually look at their brands, they're completely different, and they encapsulate each and every child's personality. So each child has written a book, but the topic is specific to their character. Each child has been on stage. The topic is specific and deliverance is specific to their character. So yes, we learned techniques. We've been to public speaking engagements and we've learned so many things. But one of the things that I really love is that the reason why it's called Dreaming Big Together, Mama's Secret Recipe, is because the secret recipe and the secret ingredient is that your child's unique essence, your child's unique gift is the secret recipe to making all this come to birth. And that's what they taught me. I started to look at the children and say, isn't it interesting how we're so different, but we sort of all interconnect like puzzle pieces. Yeah. And that's really what happened. There was a vision, but definitely not. It wasn't that. Yeah, I can't. I get so, like, when people are excited, I'm excited, and people say, why are you excited? I say, because it's so cool. I don't know what's going on. And it's like, Sabrina, wake up. You've got to wake up because it's here now. Stop being shocked by it and start utilizing it. Why? To actually transform lives. And that was the conversation that I'm definitely want to continue having with you, because it's time to start stepping up.
Brilliant. So that leads me to another question, and something I'm going to come back to as well. Why do you think that doesn't happen in every family? Why do you think every family doesn't give their children that opportunity? Why do other parents not see that? And I know we've all got our different stories and different sets of circumstances, and it's very difficult to kind of like give advice because advice is subjective. But there's something there, that everyone could tap into. It's just that they're not aware of it and they don't see the impact it can have. So, why do you think that's not happening?
I'm so excited with your questioning. You have no idea. Like, you're waking up parts of me. Number one, I was raised in a very isolated environment. So it was just me and my mum pretty much all the time. I started to become a people watcher and learn. So I guess the short answer to that is that I haven't had as much exposure as of the average mum. Like, the average mum might have had siblings. They might have had families, aunts and uncles. So in essence, the belief systems they would have embodied, for me, I would have missed like 50%, 90% of that. So you don't know what you don't know, right? So in essence, like, I had no etiquette about how you have to send a press release. If you want to be on TV, I'll just pick up the phone and say, hi guys, like, can I speak to someone that does? It's like I would do things differently because I didn't have certain boundary conditions. Yeah. And I guess the short answer is that the reason parents are not doing what we're doing is because we haven't started showing them yet. It's so simple. It's such a plug in and play. And it really goes back to what you're telling me. We need to start being out there because we're not doing anything that's supernova. Like, the most authentic thing for a child to do is draw pictures and write stories. The only thing we did is publish them. The most authentic thing for a child to do is talk all day. The only thing we did that from the stage. So, like, this is such a natural thing that you at home with your children can do. I'm sure you've got a talkative 5-year-old, a 12-year-old child that's going on 35. So our children are naturally like that. But I think because of the way I was raised and the lack of or the exposure to, I had different belief systems to what the average mum or dad would have. Like, I questioned everything. I looked at a journey thinking, why are the billboards different? So the inquisitiveness and the stages of pain, it's like when you go to that low, the only way is to bounce back up. So because I was so hungry to bounce back up, and I had a big why, just like you guys do, you love your family. But for me, it was like I was on death's door, and the bouncing back up was, for me, was I had no other option other than to preserve my children. The best way to preserve is to teach them something.
Yeah. So how do you foster that then within families, within communities? What's the key? And I just want to go back to something that I asked Paolo, and it's a question that I ask a lot, and that's, what's one thing that you've never shared publicly? And his immediate response, and I always take a lot of stock on immediate responses. His immediate response was nothing. There isn't anything I haven't shared with my mum. Yeah, and there isn't anything I haven't shared with anyone. There was one thing, by the way.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm not.
But it was, his instant reaction was like, there isn't anything, because we share everything. And I think, and again, we all have different experiences of life. And if I look at my own and other people that I know, and especially within men, there's one of the things we've forgotten to do is how to communicate, and how to communicate openly. So how do you foster that within children that are ranging from 6 to 19, when the 19-year-old doesn't want to have anything to do with the 6-year-old, typically in family dynamics? The 12-year-old also doesn't want to have anything to do with the 6-year-old because he thinks he's now 50, like you say, 35. And they've all got their own little things going on, and their own thoughts, and their own challenges that come with growing up. So how do you give them that safe space to share with each other and with you?
I love that question. I love all of your questions, and the honest answer to that is by being transparent. I had to be very mindful that my children are not going to do this for me. My children do not want me to live through them. My children don't want to fulfill and live out the dreams that I didn't get a chance to live. So I did one thing that I learned from my personal experience, is that children were supposed to be seen and not heard. So like, what's the reverse of that? Listen to them, see them and listen to them. So I asked them, like, what's the most amazing thing you'd love to do? Like, where do you want to go with this? Like, how can mummy support you with your vision? Like, I trust you with your journey. Like when I told my daughter, the older one, she just had some issues being at school. She just felt like it was draining her spiritually. She was going through doctor's appointments. They couldn't find anything medically wrong with her. So we realized she just had enough of being in the institute. She was a free spirit. And people saying all kinds of things. And I said, Shay, do you know what I realized is that one of the worst things a parent can do is make you take up a career so you live your life indebted to me, trying to make me proud, trying to make me grateful, and then die the same. I said, you know what, I'm going to trust you with your future. And I'm telling you, it was like a light bulb went off inside of her. And she said to me, Mum, you trust me with my future. So I think one of the things that I intrinsically done is gave them a safe space to speak. Any one of the family members could call a meeting. So we do talk a lot. I did everything that caused me pain. I started to say no, not because I went through pain. Like, is this painful for you? It was painful for me. They'll say, yes, mum, or no, mum, just checking in. And I'm telling you, every child is different. The reason why I laugh with Paolo, Paolo's the most expressive one. I was like, oh my God. So he just says whatever's on his mind. But I think as a parent, when we realize that our children don't belong to us, they come through us and they belong to the future. And that future, we have no idea what it is. And we don't have any idea of what's inside of them unless we ask.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. So when you think about then the kind of future, you think about your future and you think about your kids' future, because they're all getting older, they're all growing up, they're all from what I've seen, each of them is incredibly independent, and they are going to want to do very different things. What does the future look like just for you as their parent, as they grow up and they do their own thing and they are less attached. No, you know, and I'm not suggesting that, you know,
No.
that because they are independent already, but you know, you're clearly not going to hold them back. You're going to let them fly. They're flying already, but you're going to let them fly further and further as soon as they're ready and as soon as they want to. And that connection, I'm 100% sure is never going to go. But what is that? Because everything you've done so far, yeah, yes, it's been about, there's a feeling, there's a sense that it's been about you, but also a lot of it has been challenged towards creating an environment to give them the freedom. And actually, funnily enough, you are doing all of this for them. But at some, you know, the first step was you doing this for you. Then it was you doing it for them. Yeah. What does it look like when it comes back to you doing it for you again?
And that was the interesting part, because I'm 40 now. I started to reinsert myself back into my life only a few years ago. And I think that's such a phenomenal question you asked. And I think if you're a listener and you're a mum listening to this, it's so important that you start that now. I had to be very mindful that I don't want to create this interdependency that we can't leave mum. Mum has done so much for us. We all have to be together. But one thing we need to agree on is that we haven't created a family vision that lasts for next year or the next 10 years. We've got a vision to transform our generation for generations to come. So we're thinking about long-term generational pull. We're thinking about reinserting the ethos that our family will gather together. So it's like, where do I come in that? So I have to have moments of checking out, because I need to breathe. In order for me to best be there for them, I need to breathe. I need to know who I am. So one of my grandest things to do is to read books and to write. Yeah. So I have to create space, and no matter how much little space that is now, because, you know, there's lots of things I've got to do. It's that as they get older and they're, like you're saying, they're more able and they loosen, I can then just expand that. But I think it's so important to have that seed in. I have my own friendship circles. I made it my responsibility that, do I want my kids to go through me to all my connections, or do they need their own connections? So I have friends, I have things that I can do. So it's like, as soon as they go, I can go, bye guys. Like, I'm going to travel the world. And I think that is such a phenomenal question, because I think when we live our lives like that, because I lived that other life for so long, I didn't know what I liked. You'd ask, would you like a drink, Sabrina? I'd say, yeah. What would you like? Anything. You hungry? Yeah. It was so much walking on eggshells. I wasn't even present. Okay. So that question is so phenomenal for me, because it's only when we insert ourselves into our life, this can work, because it is the individuality, but also the coming together. But you can't come together if you're not there. Yeah,
absolutely. And the reason I wanted to ask that is because we do, you know, and it's no one's fault. It's just that we haven't been taught to be aware of it, and it kind of creeps up on us. But as parents, you do lose your identity.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's why that's why you do see a lot of, mothers, fathers, couples, fall apart, or the relationship starts to break up, or they turn to other addictions, because your child becomes an addiction, and you turn to other addictions, or you turn on each other, or the family break the marriage breaks up, because all of a sudden there isn't that one thing that held you together, that commonality. And over the years, you've lost your individuality, you've lost your own identity. So that was the reason I wanted to ask that, because I wanted to understand how you're taking care of that.
It's a beautiful question, because in honesty, I went through an eruption. I have to word it like that in my actual marriage. So we've recently separated just over the last couple of days, but I mean an eruption. But I was fighting. I felt like a caged bird for years. It's like it just passed on from the bullies to people I met, and everything I got involved in was just trying to restrict me. So I love what you said. So for me, and it's not going to be the same for everyone, I can only talk about my own personal journey. It was like this rebirthing of Sabrina. So when you say that question of that, is that it took a lot of pain, but there definitely has been a rebirthing of me that made me realize that I can't just attach myself to my kids. We have to be separate, then come together.
Yeah, I love that. Um, is there a moment in time, perhaps where, and we talked a little bit about this before, but where you've had to make a choice, between what's at your core, what's true to you, true to your values at the very deepest level, and a monetary decision, or because we have these situations, these kind of like crossroads sometimes, where we tell ourselves, this is who we are, this is who we are, this is who we are. Then we fall on hard times, and someone comes along and says, who's not aligned with those, and says, look, I'll give you X, Y, Z in order to do this thing for me, and hear that it's not right, but then there's the logic side of your brain that says, no, but he's offering to do this for you. Has there been a moment in time when you've been faced with that, and how again, did you kind of deal that? How do you rationalize those decisions?
Yeah, it makes me chuckle, because has it been a moment? It's like there's been years of that. Definitely. So I've definitely come to that more now, more so. I think the more I've rebirthed myself back into who I am and reconnected it to my childhood vision, I notice now that I'm more inclined to do things with like-minded people. I'd rather just go without, because what I realize is that the preservation of this is priceless. And the true investment that I do in life is investing in people. And I say that to the kids. It's like, when you invest in people, that's going to be there when it changes from, whatever the currency is, whatever the barter is, because you're invested in people and there's that level of integrity. So the rationale around it is like, who am I? Who am I? And am I creating lots of individual moments and sharing what I want to do for a lifetime with people that are just going to be there for individual moments? And because of the past that I've had, it's like, I've had enough of market research. The way I see life is like, life is market research.
Yeah.
I've had enough of that. Like, now I've learned enough. And I'm not saying that we stop learning. We're always learning. But yeah. I've had a conversation with me and my creator, and I've said, better quality problems, please. Yeah. So it's an essence of, definitely. And I love that question so much, because it really talks about the integral part of who is Sabrina and where are we going. And because I'm very much when I meet people, I like to invite them into my tribe, because I'm all about that mentality of it takes a village. I like the collective. I like long-term relationships. So if I'm going to have long-term relationships, it means that I need to have an analysis of, who are these people I want to spend time with? Yeah. Like, who am I? Because if I can't fine tune who I am, I can't just start picking, I want to spend time with these people, because I don't even know who I am. So I think the more that I can get in that reconnection with self, I find that it's that inward outward journey. So I'm having to do less on the outside because I'm doing it on the inside.
Yeah. Perfect. We haven't touched on this, but I feel that we should. Doesn't necessarily flow, but then conversations don't have to flow. But I want to ask you what was the, so number one is it's a multi-layered question. The first one is, what was it that made you make the decision to go against the grain and choose to homeschool? And what was the reaction to that from people around you? And what do you believe are the benefits having done that?
Good, excellent question again. So homeschooling, again, I'm a slow learner. I'm sure when you listen to this back, you'll realize. So I had been through a lot of pain in schools. So Lachey, the eldest one, she had to miss a year and a half of school. She was bullied by students and the teachers. She's been told to remove her shoes, like so much pain. I didn't have support at home, my husband, because he was kind of putting me down a lot. If anything happened, he would blame me. So it was like this vicious circle of just pain. So I've always wanted to homeschool my kids. I just didn't have the finances and the time. And it was a case for me, quite simply put, school was childcare. That's as simple as it was. Anyone that knows me in my journey, school has always been childcare for me, because I've never been the kind of person that takes them to school and that's it. And like, that's it. Your education is there. The way I spoke to the teachers, I used to take them out of school quite a lot to do external activities, extracurricular, don't get me wrong. But what I used to say is that I've never allowed school to disturb my children's education, because they was not in a private school. They were in a state school, and the state school wasn't up to much. So my decision on homeschooling actually came from a long process of fighting, and I just got tired. I got tired of fighting, and I said, Sabrina, what if the very thing that we're trying to, whatever you're resisting, persisting, why am I not just surrendering to the process? Because every time I went to go into employment, it wasn't happening. Like we've been on TV quite a lot, and I had someone bluntly say to me, I wouldn't give you the role because I've seen you on TV, I know what you do, so what's your game? And I felt crushed, because I felt I was constantly having to justify myself, and my husband wasn't supportive. And I was like, I actually need this job for now, just to get me to the next stage. And it was like, I have to go home and do something. I have to go home and set something up to keep us doing. So a lot of the time, in all honesty, it wasn't always my genius I was like just pushed. Really just pushed into the corner. So it was 2019 where I had a dream, and it was as simple as that. And you could speak to the kids that we had these wacky things, and I just sat them down at a meeting, and I just said, you're not going back to school tomorrow. So it was like in July, just before they broke up. So I said, you're going to have to say goodbye to your friends. We need to just take this by the horn. So the three little ones were like, yeah, because they've not wanted to be in school for a long time. And Amir triggered. So I love, like for me, I'm glad that you said it's multifaceted, because sometimes in life, it's not any one thing. Sometimes we think it's that one thing, but it's like the build up, and then there's the tipping point. For me, it was the tipping point, because my son will go to school for 2 years crying. I'm going, kids don't cry for 2 years going into school. It doesn't happen. They settle and that's it. But there was one day he looked at me and said, Mum, why are you doing this to me? And I was like, I didn't have any words, because I couldn't justify as to why. I felt like I had failed him. And then he said to me, Mum, I'm losing myself. And he just walked in. He didn't even say bye that day. And I knew that I had to find a way. So when I actually took them out of school, I didn't have tutors in place. We had an English tutor. We've always had that. But I never had things in place the way we like to plan. So I was the least prepared for school, homeschooling, but I trusted that there is something that's greater than me that will sustain me, and I surrendered to that. And the minute we came out, the likes of, we went to Chelsea Football Club, they have like a table there once a month, and then we met Brunel University there, and all these crazy things happened, and I went, oh, it's me. I've been slowing down the process. I've had all this feedback throughout my life, but I wasn't listening. So the journey for us was a very spiritual journey. So we happened to become the first ever homeschooled family to attend Brunel to do masterclasses. So I had my 6-year-old, for example, doing masterclasses in engineering that is tailored for year 9s. And because he kept up so well, at the end of that, the senior actually made him a STEM ambassador. So we was like, oh, it's really sweet. We just thought it was a good gesture. Yeah. They looked at us and said, no, you don't realize, because I didn't know that the master classes were for kids that were specially selected. And they said, we don't ever have homeschool families here, and we're just astounded by your children. And then the penny dropped for me. And I keep reminding people that I'm surrounded by is that sometimes we're pushing when we should be surrendering. Yeah. It was the moment that I surrendered, like all these things, components came to light. And just before, like it was just in March of this year, we managed as history, we've literally made history, and we're going to be talking about it publicly soon, that Brunel was astounded by the achievements of us as a family. That's what triggered me writing the book. And we managed to go into talks with them, and they opened up the floodgates to let other homeschool families go into Brunel. So it's like we have a knowing that we have a duty of care to take these leaps and bounds, because it's not just about us. Because each time we open up, not even the road less traveled is a new pathway entirely. Yeah. It opens up a vessel for other people. So it's time for us to start stepping out. So we've just got a host of families in there. They're doing computer science training, and they'll get a certificate. So yeah.
Amazing. Wow. You should be very proud. I'm sure you are. That's
and the benefit. Sorry, you asked that. Sorry, I forgot to mention. So that's the benefit is that with homes, and I wouldn't say it's for everyone. It's really about an assessment, a self-assessment. Homeschooling is about you and your child being in agreement. Like I said, my 3 little ones were like homeschool me for years. I had my son who's 15 now. He was like, no, mum, I love school. But then after being out of school for, I think, 3 weeks, he was saying he loved it. So the benefits of homeschooling for my particular family is the expansiveness of immersion. So if they are into engineering, they can spend a day with their mentor fully immersed.
Yeah.
They can do different workshops, projects. They can be more immersive and theoretical. So for us personally, it saves a lot more time. It means the kids are more focused and they can work on their strengths. So again, it depends on your children.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's important that that this people realize this isn't for everyone. Yeah, and it's not for every child, and it has to be. It almost needs to be an agreement.
Yes.
And that agreement can only come as well is if you're open and transparent and in discussion with each other. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that need to be in place in order for that to work.
Absolutely. And constant like reaffirming that agreement, what you're saying, Pete, is absolute paramount. But I'm still checking in. I had to check in with the kids and say, like, is it okay? Does it feel good? Like, are you okay with it? Because otherwise you're going to pull your hair out because they're going to be like, I can't do this. I want to go here. And you're like, well, this isn't working for me. So it's really an agreement. So because my children love what they're being exposed to and they're fulfilling their needs, it's the key. It's not me going, this is what you need to do. It's like, I needed to be creative with Trey Sean because he was a teenager and he had to have his social aspects. Obviously, he's in that space where he needs that. So I had to be immersive with how can I fulfill that as much as he was like Mr. Popular at school, having that experience. That's okay. I can't judge him on that. But as a parent, we need to be mindful, like, how are we going to get these experiences that are going to best nurture them? Not what I think, what's going to best nurture them.
Yeah. And not just and not what you want for them either. I think that's one thing I'm taking away from this is that we really need to take more notice of what our kids want, but also, and I pick up on something else because it's a big one of mine. You talked about strengths. I don't know if you've read it. There's a book called Strength Finders 2.0.
No, not yet.
Have a read of that. So it basically, the premise of it is that instead of focusing on learning things that you're not good at, why don't you identify the things you are good at and then spend time finding when you're building a business or whatever you're doing, understanding who you are, what your strengths are, and then finding people who fill those gaps and understanding what the traits and characteristics of the people that could fill those gaps have, so as you can then identify those people. And I've done this in business where I've asked potential business partners before we even move forward to go and read the book. And then there's a test at the end of the book, and you do the test, you submit it, and they come back and they give you your profile.
Wow, that is literally what we do because my son, he loves mathematics, so he's actually got a mentor that's taught him how to trade for a year, and then 6 months he's actively trading into a trust fund. Yeah. He couldn't do that at school. He did so much, but I'm going to get that book. Thank you.
You see, so it's only a small book. It's like A5. But yeah, it's extremely valuable. It's worth a read for sure. So I love that. I think there's far too much focus, especially in schools, on learning and working on the things that you're not good at. If you haven't got a bent towards doing that particular thing, then it takes up far more energy to learn to get half good at it. When actually, perhaps what we should be doing is encourage them to really excel in an area where they're engaged, where they're lit up. And where they can see results, because that's where you start to see innovation, because then you're breeding limitless thinking.
All the secrets, definitely. That is spot on.
Yeah,
that is spot on.
So we're coming to the end of our time. What I do want to just ask is a couple of final questions, and the first one is, when you look back, what words of wisdom would you perhaps give, or what things would you tell your younger self that with what you know now?
Looking back, I think the primary thing I would say to Sabrina, my younger self, Sabrina, is don't beat yourself up. I actually feel that I honor every essence of who I was in order to become who I am now. So I don't, there's nothing that really comes to mind and would I have done it differently, because I was literally juggling so many hats. There wasn't anything I needed to be more. It was actually, I could have just taken time out, but I understand why I did what I did at the time. So just really just thank her. I really, my message looking back is just thank you. It really is pure admiration, because what I did then I couldn't do now. I know I can't, because I'm in a different frame of mind. Like I literally gave everything until there was nothing to give. So I just thank her.
Perfect. And finally, I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it, but the 10 ways. So the 10 ways to access your inner wisdom and ignite your own genius. Which one or two of those really jumped out at you and said, yes, those are the things that really smacked me between the eyes?
They literally did just that. So for me, it was be still. Being still was everything that allowed all of my prayers, hopes, and wishes to come to, because I was moving so much they couldn't find me. Yeah. So that being still, just that when I read the 10, I was like, oh my God, that's the one. That is the one. And that's just everything for me. And then the second one is feel all emotions. That resonated so deeply, because I had a mantra that really got me out of those dark times, and it's something that I talk to all the kids about, so you could randomly just ask them and go, yeah, mum's always going on about that. But I would say, like, I used to listen to Abraham Hicks, and your emotions are merely your internal guidance system. So instead of going, oh gosh, I feel sad and I'm not supposed to feel sad, put a smile on, I have always learned throughout my journey is that, what is that shown up to show me? Like, you wouldn't be driving down the motorway and the fuel gauge is on F and you're going to guys, don't worry guys, let's just keep going, let's smile. So those two are so prominent in my healing process, self-development and becoming, for myself and for the kids. I was just super excited to see him on the list of 10. So I don't know how you managed to put this list together. It was phenomenal, because the stillness and honoring all of those emotions, because they were like my crew assisting me on this ship on my voyage throughout life. And without that, I couldn't have navigated at all. It just lets you know whether you're hot or cold, if you're towards north, and having no judgment around the emotions that show up. It's not bad to feel sad. And it's also important, because you talked about like depression and stress, and I've got to show my children that I'm all of that variations. I've been told off before saying, oh, you shouldn't cry in front of the kids, it will damage them, it will make them sad. And I goes, no, it will make them know that they have emotions too. It will make them honor that. And especially for my boys, like what you're saying about men, that expressiveness. Mother of 3 boys, and I know that in my relationships how that used to affect me when trying to communicate with a man that's just not present. He's not bad, he's not awful, but he has been taught to shut down his emotions, so you can't connect because there's no feeling. So like for me, like those two excited me. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
That's all right. No, perfect. I love that they kind of lit you up so much, and that always thankful and grateful when people read those. It's they came through us. Let's put it that way. They came through us. They're part of us. They're things that we've experienced. They're things that we know to be true for everyone in some shape or form. That's just our interpretation of them. So thank you for reading them, and thank you for sharing the two that kind of really lit you up the most. It's been an absolute pleasure. It really has been. I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer, but we're out of time. So I'm going to wrap this up and say thank you so much for joining us, Sabrina. Has been amazing. Thank you for sharing so openly and giving us an insight into how you've created what you've created and how you continue to create that. And we'll put some links underneath in the show notes so as people can access some of the things that we've talked about, the books and you as a family as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I apologize, I can ramble on, but this is a woman that's only recently found her voice, so sometimes it's so invigorating to be out of the cage.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
For more real-life stories of everyday genius, unconventional wisdom, and inspiring transformations, subscribe to our podcast. or go to simplyconscious.com. Get more out of life.